As Ahmed said, my name is Amy Chen, and I'm the COO of Upside Foods. We just rebranded earlier this year from Memphis Meats, but it's exciting to be here today to share a couple of reflections just on the journey ahead and building the future of food. So let's get started with one of the most basic facts that I love. Meat is loved. If you're like me and I'm from Texas, you have always loved meat, and it's always been part of a lot of the culinary and cultural traditions that we hold so close to us. I know it's always been one of the reasons and the ways that we gather together as family and friends, so it plays a really cherished role in my life. At the same time, it's loved around the world. It's $1.7 billion and growing. So what's the problem? The problem is, as many of you are very well aware, we are facing a climate crisis. The UN Secretary General recently described our current situation as a code red for humanity. He says the alarm bells are deafening and the evidence is irrefutable. And the tricky part is that the meat that we love is a big contributor to the problem. In fact, overall livestock production and agricultural production of meat uses over 1/3 of the overall planet's water and land, almost a sixth of the greenhouse gases. And if you think about beef in particular, it takes a whopping 34 calories of energy input to produce 1 calorie of meat. There has to be a more efficient way forward. That's not the only problem, though. We're also all too aware, as Ahmed alluded to earlier on, of some of the recent challenges we've had with public health. Whether it's overall concerns around antimicrobial resistance and bacterial issues, through to some of the supply chain issues caused by the recent pandemic, we are all too aware that our meat supply chain and other supply chains around the world are vulnerable. Let's not forget about the animals either. The estimates are that there are a whopping 70 billion land animals with a B, that are raised and slaughtered for food each year. What amazing achievement it will be when one day we can talk about meat that doesn't require slaughtering animals. All of this is happening at the same time that the population is growing. As I alluded to earlier, the population will reach almost 10 billion by 2050, which will overall increase meat demand by double. Now, I know that all of this sounds a little bit dire, but there's good news coming. And the good news is that cultivated meat can be a big part of the solution. And this idea is exactly what drew me to the industry in the first place. I've always been passionate and a big believer in the idea that business can be a force for good. I spent almost 15 years at PepsiCo, working in one of the world's largest food and beverage companies, thinking about ways that we could use business as a force for good. I created a social business incubator called Food for Good, which has served almost 50 million meals to underserved children around the world. I also served on the Human Rights Operating Committee, where I thought about ways that we could make our business and our overall operations more sustainable and better for the world. I also learned at PepsiCo the ins and outs of running a really complex commercial organization, something that will hold me in good stead and our team in good stead as we continue to scale up the Upside team. Throughout my life, I've always been drawn to food, to science, and to social impact. And the chance to build a commercial organization from the ground up and change the world at the same time sounded like an opportunity that was just too good to pass up. And that's why I couldn't be more excited to be with all of you as part of the cultivated meats industry, building the future of meat. I joined Upside precisely for this reason, because I was excited about what the industry and what the company was doing. We talk about our mission at Upside as making meat a force for good, making meat a force for good. And I love the idea of turning something that we love and cherish, but maybe we don't love the impact that it has on the world, and turning it into a world where there's all upside. Now, we've spent years over the last decade and the last many years, both at Upside or Memphis Meats, as we were formerly known, and many of your teams who are with us today, thinking about how to make this industry and this concept a reality. I know back then it probably seemed like science fiction, and our team spent years proving out the basic science. Could you actually get cells to grow? Could you get them to make meat? Would the meat taste good? The exciting part is that many of those most fundamental and basic questions have been answered. We've come a really, really long way since Upside Foods was the first cultivated meat in the world. Today, There are almost 100 companies working to bring cultivated meat to tables around the world. Now, we were the first to unveil cultivated beef, chicken, and duck, but now we know that everything from steaks to sushi are possible. This progress has not gone unnoticed, and we're just getting started. It's amazing to see an amazing and increasingly diverse set of investors and organizations that are showing interest in this space. When we first brought on Cargill and Tyson as investors, there were no other big meat companies or agricultural companies that were invested. Today, there are a wide variety of organizations and companies that are excited about cultivated meat and have really moved from a question of if this will become a reality to when. And based on a lot of the conversations I've been having recently, people's expectations and assumptions about when that reality is going to become a true reality in the world in a meaningful way is becoming closer and closer. We're also privileged at Upside Foods to have many well-known impact investors like Richard Branson or Bill Gates or Kimball Musk be among our ranks. And we've seen other celebrity investors and celebrities in general this year coming onto the ranks and coming onto the cadre of friends who are supporting cultivated meat. Now, when you take a step back, this might all seem like a little bit of an unconventional group of people, a group of organizations. But what I love and what I feel really passionate about is that the kind of transformation on the scale and the magnitude that we're talking about with cultivated meat will take all kinds, bringing different perspectives, different resources, different levels of scale, and different audiences to bear. So I couldn't be more excited about this kind of coalition that is forming. Now, there's also other signs that the industry is maturing. Most recently, we talked about the need for regulatory approval and saw that Singapore last year became one of the first countries in the world to approve cultivated meat. In other conversations we're having, it's really clear that countries around the world are increasingly seeing the importance and the value of cultivated meat, whether it's as another form of food security or increasing environmental sustainability or mitigating some of the risks associated with public health concerns like the microbial resistance and antibiotic issues that we talked about before. Not only are regulators excited, but we're also seeing that universities are increasingly creating programs, institutes, think tanks to support this. And they're also offering grant programs at the same time to support research in this space. Finally, we're seeing around the world, starting first in the US with the Alliance for Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Innovation that we helped co-found, but with other coalitions that are popping up around the world, that there are opportunities for all of us as the creators of a new industry to help partner together and work together and collaborate as we bring this new industry into the world. It's important for us all to hold hands and build a solid foundation for the future, whether it's helping to educate consumers about what we are, working with regulators to ensure that there is a safe and solid foundation, or just thinking about different ways that we can market and talk about our products together. There's one other thing that I'm really, really excited about. And we've talked a lot about some of the different advancements in the industry, but there's one thing that I think we don't talk about enough. And coming from the food world, it's always front of mind for me. And that's the idea that our products are absolutely delicious. You see here a couple of photos of some of our upside chicken, but I always joke that in the middle of a pandemic, I had one bite of upside chicken. And it was enough to inspire me to leave a job and a career that I loved, to sell my house and move across the country. Now, if that's not a compelling piece of chicken and a compelling taste, I don't know what is. But it's exciting to see that as we think about talking with consumers and introducing them to a whole new world of cultivated meat, we have products that are amazing and delicious and craveable and can help inspire not only their hearts and their minds, but also their taste buds. So what's coming next? A lot has already happened, but there's still an incredible amount of work to do to really scale up this industry and make it a reality and have the impact that we all want it to be. The first, of course, is regulatory approval. As I mentioned earlier, Singapore has already approved cultivated meat, but there's a lot of big steps that are still coming. We're really focused on the US and I'm working with the USDA and the FDA to ensure that we receive regulatory approval in the US. And once the US and other countries around the world become advocates and are able to put their stamp of approval on the safety of our products, it will be a huge next step to be able to open the door to many, many more consumers. I know that we're all really eager to have cultivated meat get its regulatory approval, and no one is more excited and eager and anxious about that than I am. But when I take a step back, I also think about how important regulatory approval is for the industry as a whole. It is so critical for us to get this one right, and for us to take time to make sure that there's a solid foundation, and for us to be able to partner with regulators around the world to have a clear and open and transparent conversation with consumers around the safety of our products and of the industry, and to ensure that everyone feels comfortable that a rigorous review has been done. The next big step in the journey beyond regulatory approval is really thinking about scale and how we can bring our products to a wider audience. We've already done a lot of the basic hard work and science of proving that cells can grow and make delicious meat. But the next big challenge for us is, how do we do that on scale? You've probably been aware of a lot of articles in the overall press and questions around the sustainability and viability of the industry. And we take these concerns really seriously. And there are certainly a lot of challenges to scaling up. But we also believe, if we're thoughtful about the progress that's been made over the last 5 or 10 years, that we've already done a lot of things that many people thought were impossible. But as we think about things and the next steps for the industry and scale, it's important to think about not only commercial facilities, but building out a more robust supply chain, and even developing partnerships to help us continue to remove costs from the system and to scale more quickly. These are really easy things to say, but really hard things to do. But we're incredibly excited at Upside that we recently took this next step on our journey towards scale when we announced the opening of our EPIC facility. You can see a little bit of it behind me here today, but it's what we call our Engineering, Production, and Innovation Center. Now, this facility can produce 50,000 pounds of finished products today, with a future capacity of over 400,000 pounds. And it was designed to produce, package, and ship almost any type of meat that you can imagine, from ground meats and hot dogs and sausages to whole cut formats like chicken fillets and chicken breasts. Now, we're just getting started. And one of the things that I think is really important is to think about the next generation of cultivation technology and to continue to innovate. So we've been at it for many years, and we've got the first generation of technology already in place in this EPIC facility. But we're also already thinking ahead to the next, the second, the third, the fourth generation of technology that will help us be even more efficient. And that's why, by our design, we've created it to not only be a production center, but also an innovation center that allows us to really test out the next generation of technologies. Now, when we think about the journey, it's not only about regulatory or scaling up. There's one really other important hurdle that we need to cross, and that's thinking about getting consumers on board. As I mentioned earlier, when you think about food, the most important thing that really matters to consumers is whether it tastes good, whether it's delicious, whether consumers understand what it is, and whether people can feel comfortable with how products like this can fill a new role in their life. There's a lot of different ways that you can think about getting consumers on board. One example that I'll kind of share, just because it's close to my heart, is thinking about our new EPIC facility. One of the things that we've built throughout the overall facility is these giant windows that allow folks to see directly onto the production floor. And you can see exactly how our meat is made. As we were thinking about the design of this and opening up our facility, we realized that there's no slaughterhouse in the world that would want to open up their doors to invite people in. But we're excited to do so. So we actually are gearing up for our first public tours that will start in January of 2022. And we hope someday soon to be able to welcome many of you to our own facility. But as you think about cultivated meat, a lot of the research that we've done show that consumers are really intrigued and they're curious, but they also want to know more. So opening up our doors in ways like this is an important part of our journey in helping consumers get more comfortable with the technology. We also have thought a lot about how we present ourselves into the world. And we're obviously a company that is proudly founded in science and in technology and in thinking about the most cutting edge ways to improve our food system for the better. But we also want to remind consumers that we're about food. We recently rebranded ourselves from Memphis Meats to Upside Foods, in large part to help smooth this journey and to help bring and enroll consumers along with us on this journey. It's a name that we believe captures all of what we want to be in the world, and allows us to be much more accessible globally. We want to talk about the upside for consumers' taste buds. We want to talk about the upside for the environment, for animal welfare, for food security, for public health, for so many other things. And we really wanted to telegraph that in the overall look and feel of our brand. I think it's important as we think about the future and about talking to consumers to remind ourselves and to ground ourselves first and foremost that we are food and that people want food to be delicious and familiar. And if there's science and technology that's powering a better way for there to be food, the food that they love, then fantastic. The other part of really getting consumers excited is bringing and building a network of other folks and ambassadors who are excited to share more about the space. There's a lot of great documentaries out there. There's one that Jane Goodall has just helped to narrate called Meet the Future. There's a new David Chang special called The Next Thing You'll Eat that's on Hulu. And we recently also signed on as one of our partners, Dominique Crenn, who's a 3 Michelin star chef in the Bay Area, who's one of the most exquisite and incredible chefs in the world. And one of the things that was really interesting as we got to know Dominique is that she has a huge and deep commitment to sustainability and actually took meat off of her menu a few years ago because she didn't like the way that meat was made. We invited her to come to our offices and kitchens in the Bay Area, and she tried a bite of meat and was just amazed about the potential of this. So we've been excited ever since to be working with her to develop new recipes and to think about how to create a more culinary forward future of food. I have to take an aside because as a former marketer, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to talk about cultivated meat and how to share it with consumers. And David Chang, as I mentioned, recently did a Hulu special on The Next Thing That You'll Eat. And he was on the Jimmy Kimmel show and was asked about cultivated chicken. And he had come to our offices in our kitchens a few months before. And he said to Jimmy, you know what, at the end of the day, all I'll say is that the chicken was pretty damn good. And I think to my comments earlier about the importance of reminding ourselves and consumers that this is about food, he really nailed it in one quick sentence. As we think about the future and about the future generations, I am so excited about the next generation of consumers, the Gen Z consumers, Gen Alpha coming after them, and even the millennials before them, who are increasingly thinking about making choices and making purchase decisions, voting with their wallet, with their values. We've never seen a generation that was more committed and more excited about saving the planet and about thinking and being thoughtful about the impact that their choices have on the world. So though many may initially have a question around whether cultivated meat will hit consumers and land well with them, we're increasingly convinced as we talk to consumers that this is going to be something that they will embrace and something that they will very, very quickly get comfortable with. We do a lot of market research and insights work here at Upside, and there's many other industry partners and coalitions that do so as well. But I encourage all of you to do some kitchen table research, as I call it as well. One of the things that I thought a lot about before joining Upside Foods and the cultivated meat industry more broadly was how would consumers really react to this? And I had read almost every industry study that you could imagine. And I finally decided to call up all of my nephews and nieces who are all kind of in their tweens and teens and early 20s. And I said, you know, I have a quick question for you guys. What do you know about the impact of the meat system on the world? And of course, everyone had heard that it was incredibly resource intensive and not sustainable and not going to scale. And then I said, well, what do you think about cultivated meat? And most of them kind of paused and said, well, tell me a little bit more about what that is. And I explained, well, you take a cell from a healthy animal and then you grow it outside of the animal, you feed it similar things to what it would eat. And then you can make meat that's just as delicious as the meat you've always loved, but made in a more sustainable way. And literally with that 30-second explanation, I could see all of the concerns and anxieties that I thought they would have go away. And I think that is the reality of the world that we are coming into. And I couldn't be more excited about how this next generation of consumers are going to use their voices and their hearts and their passion for the world to bring and help us transform the food system for the better. I'll close with just one thought. This is one of my absolute favorite quotes. And I think it's really apropos to the journey that we are all on together as a cultivated meat industry. the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And as we think about the road ahead, it will be long and it will be winding and it will be complicated, just as the roads that we've already traveled have also been. But the destination that we're working towards, which is a world and a planet and a food system that can have and deliver the meat and the food that we've always loved, but do so in a way that's better for the animals, better for planets, and better for all of us, is a goal that is so worthy of committing our full passion and our full hearts to do so. So thank you so much for your thoughts and your time today. And I can't wait to have a quick conversation.